in the final furlong, and it's all American Pharaoh answering this test with flying colors. American Pharaoh will romp home in the Rebel, widening to win by about 8.
8 years ago, it was American Pharaoh who captured the Rebel Stakes on his way to the first Triple Crown win in 37 years. A loaded, talented group of colts have won this race. And the championship series on the road to the Kentucky Derby continues on after kicking off with the Risen Star last week. And we got an upset. Angel of Empire coming from off the pace under jockey Luis Saez for trainer Brad Cox to vault himself to the top of the leaderboard. And I'm joined by James Scully to chat about who will be the next 50 points to the winner in the Rebel Stakes. James, as expected, with $1 million on the line, I think this race came up very strong, probably the best prep thus far.
I agree. I mean, we definitely have two major, I think, top 10 contenders in Verifying and Reincarnate. Verifying trying to become the fourth winner of a Kentucky Derby qualifier in the last 5 weeks for Brad Cox, joining Instant Coffee, Hit Show, and Angel of Empire, like you referenced. And Reincarnate making his first start for Tim Yakteen, coming in off a win in the Sham. So two exciting horses, but plenty of depth as well. Other contenders as well we'll talk about.
Yeah, before we dive into the contenders, let's talk a little bit about the pace, the probable race shape in here. James, when we get together for $1 million, big field, usually there's an honest or at least a contentious pace for these horses from off the pace to run at. I expect it to be the same come Saturday. How about you?
I do. I think that the horse that's the most likely pace setter in my mind is Reincarnate, but that doesn't mean he's necessarily going to be in front. He could be up a close second or third. The wild card to me is Verifying. He showed good speed, and Florent Giroux tapped on the brakes a little bit in that allowance race. If he comes gunning out from the rail, theoretically he could make the front passing, going in the first turn. But Reincarnate comes off an effort in the Sham Stakes where he was under serious pressure from a 6 furlong sprinter, pun intended, ran 22-1. And I just think his speed has really been even sharpened since then, working 6 furlongs and 111 and change with John V in to ride him. I expect from post 6 Reincarnate to send and try to show the way early in this Rebel Stakes.
Reincarnate is a tough horse for me to figure out, James, but I know you like him in this spot.
I do. And, he ran his first 2 races in turf routes, and then I thought he broke a little bit slowly in his first dirt maiden race, but his last 2 races have been front running, really strong performances, and they've been narrow margins of victories. But I think in both races, he's like reasserted control late, and they're really encouraging building blocks for a horse by Good Magic that seemingly is going to love longer distances and has run a fast race as well. That Sham got a 98 speed rating from Brisnet. That's the second fastest of 11 Kentucky Derby qualifiers this year.
Yeah, it sure did come back fast. And no doubt Reincarnate merits major respect off of that win in the Sham. But he's listed as the 7-2 third choice on the morning line. And that's because Brad Cox has the 2 morning line favorites, Verifying at 2-1 and Giant Mischief at 5-2. Verifying a little bit of a tricky read in terms of what kind of trip he's going to get, James. You mentioned him being along the inside, Florent Giroux aboard. Do you think he can win this race without being on the lead, or do you think he's a horse that from that inside draw will need to be sent to the front?
I think he can win the race without being on the lead. I think he will break running from that inside post, but I think that Florent Giroux will if he has room, he'll have some options. I think he can get him over in a comfortable up close stalking spot. I think that Verifying is a horse that looks like he's really moved forward from H2 to 3. He had some class running second in the Champagne, and he broke slowly in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile running mid-pack. I won't count that effort against him. But it is key for him to get a good spot in the early stages, and that rail post is a little bit of at least a minor concern.
Yeah, it is, especially if you're going to swallow the 2-1 price, but did really run impressively in the first start of his 3-year-old campaign, won by 5 1/4 lengths. And the winner of that race, we'll talk about shortly. Sorry, the runner up in that race, Gun Pilot, we'll talk about in a few moments here, came back to win impressively with a less than ideal voyage. So Verifying to me is the clear one to beat. The other Brad Cox runner is number 5, Giant Mischief. 2 really big efforts to end his 2-year-old campaign. won on the Breeders' Cup undercard, upsetting Arabian Lion, who has underwhelmed, to say the least, since that race, but it was a big 99 Brisnet speed rating, and then came back, troubled voyage in the Springboard Mile. Talking to the Brad Cox camp, they definitely think this is a talented colt, but they have a little bit of concern about him moving forward as the distances get longer. Where do you stand on Giant Mischief?
Well, I think in a mile and 16, that distance might be a good fit for Giant Mischief. But my concern is he might need a race. Like, he totally flubbed the start in the Springboard Mile. And I think that's a little bit of concern coming back in a big field like this. But if he does get away cleanly and can work out a decent trip from off the pace, he's a horse with upside, a little bit of a difficult read. But I'm willing to just use him perhaps at the bottom of any vertical exotic rungs and look for more from Giant Mischief, perhaps moving forward, even if it's at middle distances.
Yeah, that effort two back at Keeneland got a huge number. Thoroughgraphs, Brisnet, speed figures, whatever you look at. It'll be interesting to see how Giant Mischief runs from off the pace, likely under Irad Ortiz Jr. in his first start as a 3-year-old. Well, we've talked about Brad Cox, James. Let's talk a little bit about the all-time leading trainer in North America. Congrats to Steve Asmussen on that milestone 10,000th win. No surprise, he sends out multiple horses in this year's Rebel, 3 in exact. And one of them is Gun Pilot, who finished second to verifying the 2-1 morning line favorite, and then came back and I thought was very impressive, overcoming adversity. Now, he meets a much tougher field, to say the least, in here. Do you give Gun Pilot any bit of a chance in here?
Well, I always respect these gun runner colts, Scott, or fillies that are lightly raced and have shown some talent, because Gun Runner obviously improved greatly as a 4-year-old with experience. Gun Pilot, yeah, I give him a chance. He's got some tactical speed, like you referenced, and if he can work out the trip, now he's going to have to keep stepping forward and run faster. But he's only run 3 times. He has some upside, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him move forward and challenge for a minor award. I think both Gun Pilot and Red Route 1 are very dangerous for Steve Asmussen, at least to hit the board.
Yeah, Gun Pilot overlooked on debut, and I kind of held it against him. He was almost 12-1 in it. Okay at best field to close out the fall at Churchill Downs in one of the many 2-year-old maiden special weight races. But his last 2 efforts have been good. Like you said, I think he's got to take another step forward at least to get to the likes of verifying you handle him easily. Red Route Run, who you mentioned, James, is my top pick in here. I don't think he's the likeliest winner by any stretch, but I do see this pace being quite contentious with horses like Frosted Departure, Bourbon Bash towards the outside. I think they're going to have to go. And I think we already talked about some of the other horses, Reincarnate, verifying the legitimate contenders in here that are likely to be involved. And I was impressed with Red Route Run's effort, albeit over the sloppy going in the Grade 3 Southwest, when he finished an easy second that day. Arabian Night pulling away from the field, winning for fun and stamping himself as one of the top contenders for Kentucky Derby 149. Red Route Run, a horse I took a little while to come around on, James, and I don't know if he's good enough to win the race, but I think he makes for a pretty good key at a pretty good price in the exotic wagers, maybe keying him first, second, or third in the tries.
I can see it because that Southwest race, Scott, I thought was a marked improvement from his efforts last year. He got some juvenile stakes experience, ran against the best, some of the best 2-year-olds last year. And, we've seen a lot of closers really coming on here in recent weeks. Like I referenced, those 3 Cox horses were all closers. Sun Thunder and some other nice looking horses. And if you get the pace in here, Red Route 1 fits the same kind of profile where he's moving forward. He's going to pack a big late punch. And if he gets the right setup, it's possible for him to get the money.
Yeah, in the Kentucky Jockey Club, when we saw him last, he lacked room and still missed by less than 2 lengths when finishing 4th. So I think Red Route 1 has some moves forward in here as Christian Torres takes the call for the first time. Torres having an excellent winter in Hot Springs. We'll talk about one last horse in here, James, one that I think we both give a chance, at least underneath at a good price, and one that could be a part of the pace as well. And that's number 7, Confidence Game. When we saw him last, he finished 3rd in the Grade 3 Lecomte to Instant Coffee in 2 fills.
Confidence Game broke his maiden last summer, but it wasn't a fast performance. He didn't run particularly fast in any of his juvenile races, but he did record an encouraging allowance win in his last juvenile start, beat Rocket Can, who came back and won the Holy Bull for Bill Mott. And I thought last time he got caught up chasing a hot middle fraction. That race there, took a little bit of a toll in his first race back off of a freshening, but he held in well for 3rd. And he's got that tactical speed. I think a lot of these horses in here, it's a little bit of a question perhaps of trip. If he's sitting 2nd or 3rd on the outside, he's in an ideal spot, maybe even 4th. And he's a horse that at 15-1 on any vertical tickets, I'm going to look to include.
Yeah, I like his chances to at least hit the board as well. Ran a couple of really big races as a 2-year-old. The LeCompte off a bit of a freshman. Keith DeSormo showing some confidence, shipped him into Hot Springs to run for the lion's share of the $1 million purse in the Rebel. So at 15-1, he's a must use for me. Well, the Rebel going to be a lot of fun. We're going to see someone like Angel of Empire take that step forward and jump up the leaderboard, earning 50 points if they get to the wire first. And you can still opt into the Kentucky Derby TwinSpires leaderboard competition. It's getting late, but the leaderboard took a big swing and a big turn last week with Angel of Empires off the pace win. Michael from California now leads the way with 169 points. Dave from Wisconsin sitting in second with 151, and then William from Indiana with 143. Like I said, I've mentioned in the past, it's not too late to get involved. It's starting to get a little late, but definitely opt in and take your chance in the Rebel. Best of luck this weekend in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and in the Rebel Stakes.